delighted to be here today talking to one of my favorite people in Ventura County, Tom Spence. He has been in radio in Ventura County, get this, since 1979. Currently, he is on the KVTA morning show. He is one of the personalities there. Tom, welcome. I'm glad to have this chance to sit down and talk to you.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad to be here.
30 years in radio here in Ventura County. You have seen some changes. You've seen some radio stations change formats. What different formats have you been involved with yourself?
I started off 1979, and it was Thanksgiving. I was called in to get my first radio job that was with a classical music station, of all things.
Classical.
And I knew nothing about classical music, and I mean nothing except from Warner Brothers cartoons. So I got into that, bought a stack of books, and I used those for pronunciation guides and to get familiar with the music. And that was 91.1 FM, KCPB. And it was bought by US.
Okay, yeah, great.
And that was my departure because I couldn't be a Trojan.
And after that,
after that, I went straight to KNJO, 92.7 FM, Conejo, KNJO, and that was in Thousand Oaks. A real fun station, great group of people, and we played what would be adult contemporary. So back then it was a lot of Lionel Richie, a little bit of Michael Jackson too.
Okay, flashback to the 80s, I'm with you there.
Then I went forward to Q105, which was contemporary hit radio, which is Casey Kasem's top 40 basically, and that's what happens there. At that note is when the industry really took its first major change, because in the old days, going back to 1980 and prior, a owner could only have 2 stations in a market.
Right.
Then they came up with the LMA, which was a local management agreement or lease management agreement, where you could own more stations. So my owner, a great guy named Hal Frank, bought 2 stations, 95.9 and AM 1400. One became Radio Elefante, and the other became, what are we going to do with it? So he suggested country, and he put me in the morning on a country station.
Because you are a country guy.
And I could wear boots. But it didn't work out so well, so he asked me, what format do you think we should go with? KMPC 710 just flipped from adult standards to, I believe, sports talk back then, and I said, big hole in the market, let's go for adult standards. We did it, and instantly we got a 4.0, which was a rather high rating for this market. And the demo, as we call it, the age group that listens to your station, is, we used to joke that it was 60 to 6 feet under. You had a lot of older people listening to the music. It was a lot of fun, they were loyal, and it was a blast working that format.
Good. Now, what are some of the major changes that you've seen in radio over your 30-year career?
Probably the biggest change is this local management agreement, because now you have the huge companies that come in and they own 200, 300, 400 stations. So you end up with a lot of syndication, and you end up with a lot of local jobs going away. But rather than say, woe is me, you look at what's happening on the horizon, you see it, and you realize this is an inevitable situation, so how do you react to it? So now a morning guy on a station could actually be on 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 stations, the ultimate goal being like Howard Stern. But other than that, you're looking at a guy like me. I mean, there was one morning where we had a fire, and I was on 1400, 95.9, and 105.5 all at the same time. Wow. Because with the automation, I was doing breaks on all 3 stations. That's probably the biggest change, because you can go from vinyl to tape to CD. That's more of the way the music was carried. But the biggest change really that impacts the local environment and the listeners is the fact that instead of having 15 announcers at a station, now you might literally actually have one.
Just have one.
Just have one announcer.
Well, you say that's inevitable, and it may very well be, but does it really force out local radio? Isn't local radio still important to the local market?
I think local radio is vital, and the way we can combat that, rather than in the old days, another issue that a lot of us on air had, we would be on 10 at night till 2 in the morning thinking that the whole world was about us because we were the announcer. We didn't realize that we had to add more value. And I think with local radio, and you had an excellent interview with Fritz Coleman, and he nailed it. When you're local, you talk about the potholes. You talk about the great diners. You talk about the great beaches. You bring in all of the information. You talk about the fires. You talk about the traffic. So people might say, you know, I have a great iPod. Pandora on the internet is excellent. Sirius Satellite is good. But when I tune in the KVTA morning show, for example, I know I'm going to get people who are nice, funny in some cases, but they give me the information I really need, and you can be pals with them. To flip over, are you going to shop at Walmart? Well, sure, I have no problem with Walmart, but I'd rather go to a local guy that's really going to chat with me, and I like that relationship. And I think radio, if applied properly, can score huge, and there could actually be a resurgence coming back to the local radio as long as we serve the local people, and that's essential.
Okay, I like that. Well said. Now, 30 years in radio, let me do the math real quick. That is over 1,000 days that you've been involved in radio. Tell me, looking back over your career, if you had to pick an ideal day, what would an ideal day in radio look like for Tom Spence?
It's very biblical, and it sounds terrible initially, but it's really the fires, the floods, and the fury, because that's when you know you're vital to the community. We had an issue, it wasn't the recent fire, but about 3 years ago, there was a fire that approached 2 trees, and for everybody who's familiar, those 2 trees are more than just 2 eucalyptus trees up on a hill. It's a sign.
They embody the community, really.
Every painter has painted those, every photographer, and they were in jeopardy. And we went on the air and we started talking about this. The phones went nuts. First of all, people telling us the history of the trees, then what kind of trees they were. And it's that type of contact that is very spontaneous, very sincere. And it's those days when you know you're making it easier for people. You're being reassuring. You're telling them where the services are. Those are the real fun days, in a way, to get energy. You know, those are the great days. The other days, just on a regular morning when something hits and everybody's laughing and you're having a good time, which for the most part is every day for us. We're really lucky to be in the business because it's a blast. It's truly fun, and you're helping people. You're doing charity events. I've been hooked into more charities than I can imagine, and each one of them has just been an absolute pleasure.
Good, good. I like that. I like the part you talked about with the benefits, too, benefiting the local community. Over your 30-year career, though, how have you benefited the stations that you have worked for? I mean, there's some concrete examples of value that you brought to them.
Sure, I would like to think so, and that's why I've been with companies for so long. I've had a pretty good relationship with all of my owners, because once I got over myself 10 to 2 in the morning and realized it wasn't all about me, I started looking at how can I help the salespeople, how can I help the owners, how can I help the community, and being in there knowing that, you know, it's vital to deliver and to make yourself worthy. So I've always been a good idea man. I can usually come up with a phrase pretty quickly. So if I'm at a client meeting, I'm confident that I can do something to help that guy with his business or that woman with their business, because the bottom line is we do radio, we need to get listeners, but when people advertise and give us our lifeblood, we must drive customers to their business. That's the end of the day.
And you bring up a good point, because one of the things that I do know about you, and that is your wit and your humor. You have a very quick wit. You're a very funny guy, albeit a dry guy. How does that help you in your day-to-day performance in the job?
I think where it really helps you is, and if you look at award shows, which is my favorite thing, if you notice, a lot of times when a regular actor or actress hosts a show, they're good line readers, but they're not spontaneous.
Right.
When Steve Martin, George Carlin in the old days, people like that host a show, it's brilliant. Ricky Gervais is the recent guy, because they can handle things as they go. They don't mind if things get thrown at them, because they almost want it. They're itching for it. And the sense of humor, being around a lot of clever people, has always put you at the top of your game. So it gives you the energy. And I'm not worried if I crack the mic. Okay, you're going to trip occasionally, but generally the outcome's going to be good.
Good, good. Looking back over your career, if you had to do it over again, is there any one thing that you would do differently?
I would have educated myself.
How do you mean?
I would have gone to school. I think I'm fairly street smart, and I read a little, but I am not a person of knowledge from the university, let's say that. I definitely would have received a diploma and pursued education aggressively, and I would have been more organized. That's it.
Well, as you look back over your career, Tom, how do you want to be remembered here in Ventura County for your radio career?
I would like it to be the fact that woke people up with a smile. I was always there for a charity, was willing to do something semi-outrageous. I walked 58 miles in one of the Relay for Lifes one year. I always tried to be the guy who did that. So I want to be known that, in the good sense, that I was a real player and had a lot of energy and was willing to attack any situation.
Great. We've been talking to Tom Spence, everybody. He is one of the co-hosts on the KVTA Morning Show and a longtime veteran in radio here in Ventura County. Thank you so much for listening.